In 1966, New Musical Express magazine held a huge concert at Wembley Stadium in London for their poll winners program. On the bill were the Beatles, the Stones, Roy Orbison, Cliff Richard, and the Seekers, who'd been voted Best New Group by their readers. The Seekers were on their way to becoming one of the biggest music acts in the world, and they played this song.
Close the door, light the light, we're staying home tonight, far away from the bustle and the bright city lights. Let them all fade away, just leave us alone, and we'll live in a world of our own. We'll build a world of our own that no one else can share. All our sorrows will leave far behind us there, and I know you will find there'll be peace of mind when we live in a world of our own.
The Seekers lived somewhere between pop and folk. Two guitars, a double bass, four voices singing in harmony, but the voice out front was so clear and rich and bell-like and beautiful, and it belonged to Judith Durham. Judith was an unlikely member of a folk pop group. She was actually a classically trained pianist who'd run away from that to join a jazz group. But that voice, it's so arresting and compelling. And as I was playing it in the office earlier this morning, people stopped what they were doing to listen with a dreamy expression on their faces. Judith Durham is touring Australia. It's called the Colours of My Life Tour. It's named after one of the first songs she wrote with the Seekers. It's her first concert tour in more than a decade. I'm so pleased to be sitting in the studio with her. Hello, Judith.
Hello, Richard. What a lovely introduction. That was beautiful.
Thank you. 50 years, you're filling concert stadiums. There's been enormous fuss over what you do pretty much since 1964, I think, or thereabouts, 63, 64. Is it hard for you to do the shopping still?
No, I've been very, very lucky with the level of fame that I've had. I think all the Seekers would bear this out. We have such a family kind of relationship with our fans. We've never been mobbed. We've never had the paparazzi outside the door. So it's pretty nice in a way. You know, if people do recognise me, it doesn't always happen that I know they have. But, you know, if they make themselves known to me, you know, it usually feels like meeting an old friend. So I'm very thrilled to be able to have this stage of my life now too.
I've been listening to your most recent stuff, and your voice is just as good as it ever was. It's so it's so strong and beautiful. What do you put that down to? Is it clean living, Judith?
Well, I do think it might be contributing. I turned vegetarian, and that was in 1968, just when I left the Seekers, when I met my husband-to-be at that time. So since then I haven't had any meat, fish or eggs, but that alone really wouldn't, I don't think, make sure that my voice was clear. I tend to think it's because I'm also concentrating a lot on fruit and vegetables, and when I sing I only have grapes and green leaves, and I've grape juice if I can get it. Mind you, it's jolly hard to get grape juice without it being fermented, but anyway. And I have soy milk. I don't have dairy foods anymore. So I really do make sure I don't have carbohydrate and protein. I think that really helps. And, of course, no alcohol and getting good sleep. They're very important facts in my life as well.
Yeah, so many, of course, any great singer has to worry. They tend to worry on a daily basis. You know, this thing that has given me all this in life, could it fail me tomorrow? Are you one of those people that worries about that a lot, or you've lived so long and it's been so good for you, it doesn't bother you anymore?
Oh, look, there's always that sense for me that I'm not really doing it. I never feel that I can sing. I never feel I'm capable of anything, but I've learned now that I probably shouldn't worry about it. I should just have faith that if I'm doing something for the right reason, that somehow that will be empowered. So I go ahead with sort of a sense of faith and trust. And particularly with this tour, I've told everyone, in fact, in my concerts at the moment, I'm telling people that it's like an adventure. I didn't know. I wanted to say yes to the tour, and everybody said, oh, don't worry, you'll be great, you'll be fine. But really, I just had to say yes and then trust that somehow it'll all work, which it is, luckily, wonderful.
I heard what you said before. You said, I don't think it's me doing it. Who is doing it then, or what is doing it? Do you see yourself as a vessel for something else?
Yes, I do, yes. I mean, who keeps my heart beating? I mean, how does it all happen? I don't control everything and I don't control anything. So that's the way I look at everything in life now. Sometimes you have it, well, a lot. We mostly think we have a sense we're doing things, but I truly now realise that the test for me is to just let go and let it all happen the way it's supposed to.
And does that bring you some... is that a relaxing idea or a troubling idea?
Oh, well, it enables me to do things. It would be much easier to stay home and put my feet up and watch telly and listen to you. Yeah, no, it's important to keep doing things in life. You know, I wanted to keep doing things, especially now that the internet has erupted in our lives, and I hear from fans all around the world who are saying, oh, I'd love to see you in concert. I'm thinking, well, you know, I've still got life, haven't I? I mean, it would be much easier to stay home, but the thrill, I mean, this tour has just revealed to me a whole new level of what my performances can bring about, and my contribution to that, what's happening on that stage, is rather important, even though it's not the be-all and end-all with a lovely orchestra, well, band. I've got a 5-piece band, but it's just magnificent performing on this level now. So it's a big surprise. Everything's a big surprise to me.
The thing, finding out about your childhood in music, you grew up in Melbourne and Hobart. Music didn't come to you in the kind of typical way of people of your generation. There wasn't, I don't know if there was a record player in your house or a TV or...
The TV didn't exist. You think back when it was 1943. There wasn't television at all till 1956.
So music came to you then through sheet music?
It did, and the radio. Mum used to have the radio on in the house, so my early experience of hearing people sing was definitely from that. But yes, and Dad was a great self-taught pianist. We had an upright piano. So my sister and I used to get on the piano and play chopsticks and that sort of thing. But Dad, it really inspired me of what you could do on a piano. And so Mum and Dad gave us both piano lessons from my first age was 6. And then the whole world of reading music opened up.
Yeah, and give me a sense of that, because I really think that it sounds like once you learnt to read and sight read music, that then became more than just a nice thing. It was much more than a nice thing for you. It was indeed a kind of almost an obsession.
Without a doubt, that's probably a very interesting word to use. It was such an enjoyment, such an adventure. It was like reading a book, like other people. If you can, I think that I've never said that to anyone before, but if I could equate it with that experience where you open the first page of a book and you don't know what that story is going to tell you, and it gets more and more exciting, and you have a sense of, oh, that was wonderful. That's how I am having read a new piece of sheet music. Not knowing what the tune was back then, I didn't know those tunes. So, you know, I'd see a title on a page and then I'd learn that song from the music. So songs I went on to record much later on, I first heard by myself singing it and accompanying myself on the piano from the sheet music.
There's a link between, I think, enormous talent and infirmity, as childhood infirmity. It sounds like there were a lot of people who weren't that well in your house when you were little.
Oh, well, Mum, of course, was struggling a lot. Yes, I mean, she had asthma and emphysema later on. And my sister and I were quite allergic children, so we tended towards asthma, and I used to get hives, and Beverly had eczema. So, yeah, we had problems. I mean, Dad was great, and he was very stoic through that, and especially when he'd been to war and came back as a decorated DFC award person from the navigators, as a navigator in the Pathfinders. So, very, very brave man, and now I can really, really appreciate Dad. And the musicality that he was born with never really had an avenue where he probably could have been a professional entertainer. He had that aspect about his personality.
He was charming, wasn't he?
Oh,
and a raconteur and naturally funny and all those things.
Absolutely. He'd tell jokes. He'd be the life of the party. Absolutely. Yeah, great singer. So obviously a lot of my musical talent, well, from both of them really, my musical talent, and Beverly's. Beverly's a great singer too. Beverly Sheehan, a professional now. So we were both very blessed with their, heritage of musicality, even from my grandma too.
How about you had your own specific ailment and it affected your lungs? And this is what really surprised me, because I thought of all people I would ever talk to on this show, a person who would have to have kind of medically perfect lungs would have to be Judith Durham. But it's not true.
Yes, I mean, that was quite a challenge from when I was a child. I got measles, and it's bronchiectasis that I have. People get it from all other reasons as well. They can have it as an aftermath of pneumonia or even a peanut going to the lungs, things like that. But in my case, it was the measles. So I was diagnosed when I was 18, and at least then we knew what it was, and we knew it would be progressive. So, you know, I mean, I just dealt with it, and I'm lucky to have that and not something much more difficult to deal with.
Is it hard for you to take a breath? And has it always been hard for you to take a breath? And how do you sing so well with a kind of reduced lung capacity?
Well, I guess I've never really studied singing properly, and I haven't put the practice in that people do. But I know that, technically speaking, you're not meant to use a lot of air when you produce your note. So I think...
maybe it stopped you from being a belter, you know, someone who'd belt out a tune.
Well, I am a belter. I've been told I am when I want to be. You know, when I sing traditional jazz. No, I've always loved singing full throttle. But but it's just, you know, you just have to sort of juggle it. I always hope the people will applaud between songs so I can have a bit of a cough if I need to. I wouldn't be any good in a 3-hour play because, you know, I'd have to be dead quiet for like 3/4 of an hour between the applause, and I'd have a bit of a problem there. But yeah, look, I'm lucky. I honestly think I've been given the best possible livelihood. It's meant that I've been self-disciplined about my cough. I've followed the diet very carefully when I need to. And I think if I didn't have that challenge, maybe I would have gone a bit haywire, which may have meant that I wasn't as healthy in other ways.
Tell me about your first major performance in Hobart at the beautiful Theatre Royal. I love that theatre. It's one of my favourite theatres in the world. Tell me about how that went for you, Judith.
Well, I was very lucky that I was going to a school down there which concentrated on the arts, and one of the 2 headmistresses, Audrey Morford, would write the school play each year and produce it. So she asked me to play a principal role.
What was the role?
Well, that particular year they were producing The Pied Piper of Hamelin, and I was the principal rat. I tell this story in my shows, actually.
But not any old rat.
No, principal.
Top principal rat, yes.
Oh, my word. Yes, so, you know, I dreamed I was a happy rat in that delightful dream. That's the last line of the song, and yeah, very precious memory, and I can remember standing on that stage, like you say, what a magic experience that is in that theatre.
You were going to be a concert pianist, but you were kind of lured away by jazz. This is living back in Melbourne as a teenager. Tell me about this jazz dance scene that was in Melbourne that you were kind of briefly a part of. What were those nights like?
Oh, look, it was trad jazz, of course. It wasn't cool jazz. You know, anything before 1940 was what I was attracted to. Dixieland and blues and gospel, of course, all part of that. 7-piece jazz bands. But it wasn't just Melbourne, it was everywhere in Australia. It was all over the world. In England, huge revival. I mean, there had, of course, been the 20s and 30s era of that music, but it was a big revival in the late 50s, early 60s.
And this was at a time when, you know, the initial flourish of rock and roll had kind of fallen over into Perry Como land, and the Beatles hadn't arrived on the scene. So this was this kind of interregnum in the early 60s, thereabouts. Yeah,
that's an interesting way you've put it. I hadn't even thought about that because, of course, Elvis Presley did the big thing, didn't he, to really launch, and Bill Haley, I suppose, were bringing rock and roll about. Well, all the influence that they brought about, there were dances around where the lovers of rock and roll had their dances at the town hall next door to where the jazz dancers were. So this is how it was in Australia. They had jazz clubs in London too. Not sure about America. I don't know which years the revival of trad jazz happened in America. It must have happened from the early 50s, I think. So it was very popular, and bands like Kenny Ball, Acapulco, they had number one, and indeed Chris Barber, they had number one records, Midnight in Moscow, Petite Fleur, and Stranger on the Shore, in fact, which are a bit more sentimental, but Acapulco's band was a red-hot trad band, you see. So it was very exciting music. And even though I hadn't given up on the idea of classical music at that stage, I just wanted to get up on a stage and sing with a band. So I learned 3 blues and asked if I could get up, and it led to me having regular dates with particularly Frank Trainor's jazz band, and I recorded an EP, which in turn led to then the Seekers doing an album. Our first album is the Seekers. But initially it was just me thinking, okay, just for a while I'm going to do this, and I mustn't strain my voice, and, you know, still thinking I'd probably be learning how to sing opera, and, of course, keeping my piano going, probably.
How did hearing Bessie Smith, the great Bessie Smith, one of those great jazz singers of the 1920s and 30s who died kind of mysteriously, actually, in an awful car accident, and was a kind of huge inspiration for so many performers. How did hearing Bessie Smith change you and the way you sang?
Well, there's no doubt she was a very big influence. Incidentally, that car accident, of course, she was refused by
Medical
White Hospital.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, because she was a black, wonderful Empress of the Blues. Her voice hit me right in the solar plexus. I really was inspired to sing her kind of music, which was not white woman's music at all, from a respectable school. And, you know, it was a completely different... I had no idea that music existed till I heard her sing the blues. I knew about Sophie Tucker, of course. She was a red-hot mama, but a white lady, of course. And I loved those songs. And indeed, just harking back to the sheet music you're talking about, I had an album of Sophie Tucker sheet music. So that's how I learned Sophie Tucker songs. But some of that crossed over. You know, she would have sung Some of These Days. And so Sophie Tucker songs also crept into my trad jazz repertoire, along with, Wailing Willow Blues and Weeping Willow Blues, and songs like Alexander's Ragtime Band, which I would have first learned from sheet music of Irving Berlin's songs. And then I was hearing Bessie Smith sing Alexander's Ragtime Band with Louis Armstrong playing piano, trumpet in the background sort of thing. So it was quite an education to realise that the influence of the black trad jazz scene originating in New Orleans had infiltrated all our pop music in the white Tin Pan Alley songs, and that the blues and gospels that sort of crossed over into English folk music, and of course the American folk music, they all kind of, so if I sang Just a Closer Walk with Thee with my trad band, and of course it sung in churches, then when I sang with the Seekers, we had gospel music in our repertoire, so I brought Just a Closer Walk with Thee into what became then the Seekers repertoire. Opened up them pearly gates, I used to sing with the jazz bands, and it crossed over. But the Bessie Smith element was the thing that really inspired me to get up and actually sing with a band. So that was a turning point, because I was offered a job and I kept coming back and then recording, and so a whole year went by, and then I happened to meet up with the Seekers.
Yeah, so there you are, a successful jazz singer in Melbourne doing well. You're pulling crowds to your gigs with Frank Traynor and other people. And that's when you met Athol Guy, the bass player from the Seekers. Now, this is the lovely story. When you look at old photos of the Seekers, you look great. Like, you look really sharp. All those guys in those great 60s sharp. It looks like something from the TV series Mad Men. And then I discover Athol Guy was working in advertising.
Absolutely.
So he was a 60s Mad Men. And that time, wearing that suit, living that life.
Yep.
Well, I'm assuming he was living that life. I don't know. And that's how you met Athol Guy, and that's where the Seekers started.
Yeah, I did. And if I'd known it was an advertising agency, I wouldn't have gone along to be interviewed for the job.
Why?
Because I didn't feel I was that type of person. No, truly, I would have thought I'd have to be a lot more glamorous and trendy to go into that world. I'd just been working in the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital as a secretary for 2 years for the pathologist there. And I was, a studious type, and of course I was a trained secretary as well, being part of that. So when I went along for the job, I knew it was J. Walter Thompson, but I didn't know exactly what that was till I got out of the lift. So I thought, oh, well, I'm here now, I might as well go in for the interview, and they probably won't give me the job, is what I was thinking. So then when I started work, which was actually the following Monday, and I walked in there and I told the girls I sang with jazz bands and things, and they said, oh, there's another singer in here, his name's Athol Guy. Well, I knew who Athol was and he knew who I was. So when I walked into his office, he said, why don't you come along and have a bit of a sing with me and Keith and Bruce, my mates. We're the Seekers and we sing in a coffee lounge, and that was when the Seekers first sang.
Did you have a moment when you kind of thought, we've got something special here? Because there's something about that mix of voices that you had, with yours up front, that is really electrifying. There must have been a moment, maybe quite early on, where you realised, wow, this has kind of got a bit of rocket fuel behind it.
When the four of our voices struck up, that was the very first time that I would have sung with male voices. So it was a very distinct blend, and we had all very different sounding voices too. So it wasn't as if we'd say, OK, well, we'll book a baritone and he's going to sound like a typical baritone. Athol's got his own character. So what was fascinating about the Seekers blend, and it's something to marvel at really, that fate put us all together. And you couldn't have created that sound artificially. It just happened. And as the years went by, I came to appreciate that more and more, that we were meant to be singing together. But I wasn't thinking in terms of pop music. None of us were. We were singing, as I mentioned before, folk songs and gospel songs, essentially. So, and things like say, for instance, the Kingston Trios and those sort of songs. So there was that sort of crossover. Skiffle kind of came into it as well. That other sort of side aspect of folk and gospel and all that. So skiffle was a very important aspect. And, of course, their instrumentation, they were such great musicians on those acoustic instruments, including the banjo, of course. Both Bruce and Keith played extremely well on the banjo. So it was an eye-opener for me that this could exist. But my thoughts definitely hadn't gone to pop music. Even when we made our trip to England for the 10 weeks, it never crossed my mind that we were going to be a pop band. We were just doing acoustic folk music as far as we were concerned. And it was really only when we got over to England and we met up with Tom Springfield, we were introduced to him by Eddie Jarrett, who became our manager, and Tom produced a song that he had written especially for us, with my own voice in mind, of course, and the blend of and all the instruments as they were. All he did was add percussion. He added a conga or a cabassa or whatever he thought, particularly with the first record, I'll Never Find Another You. The cabassa is what you hear, dum da 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 da. That's his idea, and that's the commercial flavour that he gave it. Went to number one all around the world.
And here it is. This is the Seekers with I'll Never Find Another You. Is the Seekers with I Know I'll Never Find Another You. Beautiful song there. Judith Durham is my guest in conversation. Just as we were playing that, Judith, I kind of realised that one of the things that makes Seekers songs distinctive is that the riff on the guitar is played on a 12-string in a lot of your songs.
Oh, absolutely. That was Keith's idea. I remember him talking to me about the fact he'd just bought one. That was in the days, probably a couple of months before we actually recorded I'll Never Find Another You. So the 12-string riff, bam, 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 that riff, and of course the Georgie Girl one, very, very important and a wonderful, wonderful addition to our actual natural sound of the first instruments we were with. Yeah, very talented man, Keith. He also gave us all the harmonies to sing. He would write out or teach Bruce and Athol what their parts should be. So the particular voicing of our four voices is very important and all due to Keith.
This is Conversations with Richard Feigler. Conversations broadcast, podcast, and online.
I'm with Judith Durham, and she's touring Australia at the moment, her first concert tour in more than a decade. So, Judith, the Seekers had gone to London, and you'd had a number one, seeming like half an hour after you got off the boat, practically, I think, with I'll Never Find Another You. Were you ready for all that intense and sudden scrutiny? Were you confident enough to withstand that?
Oh, it's funny you should say that. Not at all. Not at all. I was making my own dresses and still longing to lose weight. I looked a bit different then than I do now. I was probably 4 stone heavier than I am now. So, no, I was quite daunted by it and didn't really think that I looked like or was like a real pop star. So, I mean, I did my best and I tried to dress, as fashionably as I thought. My role model was the Queen, actually, when I first got to London. It's true. I thought, I'll try and match my handbag to my gloves and my shoes.
But I've seen you in those old films. You're gorgeous in them. You're so gorgeous, but you didn't feel gorgeous?
I didn't think I was adequate, no. No, I didn't. It was the old story where women are so much influenced by what they see in the media. And I didn't truly understand that people had totally accepted me exactly as I was. Now I'm lucky to have had a long enough life and career to really see that and to be grateful for my early photos and realise I didn't have anything to worry about. But, back then I had a lot of heartache about it. So I actually value singing Georgie Girl now in my shows very much because the lyric in Georgie Girl is so much to do with self-esteem.
You're always window shopping but never stopping to buy.
Absolutely, that was me. And Jim Dale wrote those fantastic words. Of course, it was Tom Springfield's music, all written especially for that beautiful cult black and white movie. And the song was nominated for an Oscar, in fact. So it was a very, very in-depth song and timeless, totally timeless. So it's meant that it's become part of my life for very many reasons.
Did you worry if you thought then that you didn't deserve all this kind of love and scrutiny that was coming your way? What are they doing? That kind of weird feeling. And this is extremely common. Did you think that somehow you'd be found out one day or something, or someone would come to you and say, you've done very well, Miss Durham, but your half hour is up. That's it. It's time to walk off the stage now. Thank you, and time to bring on, I don't know, Dusty Springfield or something. So did you think that was going to happen to you one day?
Look, I did truly think I wasn't a real pop star, that's for sure. But look, to be honest, though, you see, I was in a bit of a conflict. In fact, I tell my audience this during my 50-year retrospective on stage, because it is very much part of my story that when we went to England, we went for 10 weeks. And bearing in mind, I didn't feel like a real pop star and wasn't even aspiring to be a pop star because, I wanted to be a star, but I thought it'd be more musical comedy or, of course, one day maybe to learn opera. So my heart wasn't kind of steeped in being the pop star and becoming what that's supposed to mean. So it was like a sort of a delayed... I thought, well, how long am I supposed to be in the group? It was a real trying to reason it through, thinking when might be the appropriate time to do other music, because I knew I wanted to sing and play piano, other music. And, of course, I was still hoping that I might get married. And bear in mind, back then you were an old maid before you got to 20. Well, when you got to 25, you were officially an old maid. And at that time I thought I might be having children even. So I was trying to think, how do I fit all this in, and yet not wanting to leave the Seekers because it was fantastic in the Seekers. I wanted to do that justice, and you want to know what the end of that story might be. And, of course, there never would have been an end to that story. It's still fantastic that the four of us have been together for several reunions, and it's absolute magic the way it always was, and everybody absolutely loves it, and new fans have come along. At my shows, in fact, I'm meeting 7-year-olds who absolutely adore, all the Seekers songs, and it's brilliant. So what was I supposed to do? It was this real argument with myself, what do I do? Yeah, so... And
that's why Georgie Girl was kind of the perfect song in some ways for that time.
Oh, look, without doubt, Georgie Girl was the perfect song for me. Yes, that's absolutely true. But yes, it was just that interesting thing that I didn't truly identify, I suppose, with the role that I'd been cast into. I was trying to do a good job. I never wanted to let anyone down. But it was just this question of if I'd need to do other styles of music, how on earth may that happen? So it was just hard. I just didn't know what to do. That's really the dilemma, yes.
Here's Georgie Girl from the Seekers with Judith's amazing voice up front.
Hey there, Georgie Girl, swinging down the street so fancy-free. Nobody you meet could ever see the loneliness there. Inside you, don't be so scared of changing and rearranging yourself. It's time for jumping down from the shelf. A little bit, hey there, Georgie Girl, there's another Georgie deep inside. Bring out all the love you hide, and oh, what a change there'd be. The world would see a new Georgie Girl. Hey there, Georgie Wake Girl. Up, Georgie Girl. Hey there, Georgie Girl. Georgie Girl. Hey there, Georgie Girl.
That's Georgie Girl from the Seekers. Judith Durham's my guest in conversation touring Australia at the moment with her Colours of My Life tour, named after one of the songs she wrote with the Seekers. And that's when you really started to find the confidence to write your own songs, Judith, wasn't it?
Yes, it is. And in fact, it was really David Riley who gave me that confidence. It wasn't exactly written with the Seekers. Certainly the Seekers recorded Colours of My Life, which was a huge privilege, really. I was so grateful they did. But David Riley was the one who had the idea of the song in mind, and he asked me to collaborate with him on it. And I'd never written a song, never thought I could. I'd tried many times. I couldn't think of any ideas. So we wrote about 19 songs together. And, of course, Colours of My Life, now the name of the tour, the name of the album, which is my 5 decades of music. And Graham Simpson, when he wrote my book, he called it Colours of My Life, the Judith Durham story. So I'm very, very grateful that that song has been in my life. And it kind of, certainly the idea, wow, I wonder if I could do this. Nothing actually happened, inspiration-wise, until I was looking for songs for my second A&M album. I signed with A&M after I left the Seekers. And so I was going to all the different song publishers to get material. And one particular song publisher said, I don't know why you don't write songs yourself. You play piano, you sing, and Ron, of course, was with me. You know, Ron plays piano. Why don't you just write a song? And the next morning I woke up and I had an idea for a song in my mind. And that was literally the first time I'd ever thought of words and music. It's called Let Me Find Love. So that was in 1969, just prior to when Ron and I got married. And then it opened the door. In fact, with that song I had to ask Ron, have you ever heard this before? Because I truly thought I must be remembering somebody else's song. I couldn't believe I'd thought of something, you see. And he said, no, it must be an original. So we decided it must be an original just because Ron couldn't remember it.
As you say, you left the Seekers and that was, I don't know, such a big deal. And I have to say, I think I can understand why you did have to leave. It was so big. There were so many number one hits. It's the kind of thing that in the end, that would be your whole life forever after a while. And it was kind of perfect, a good time to leave. You'd had all these number one songs.
It never would have been a good time to leave. I must interrupt you on that one. Never it would have been a good time to leave. No. What became this huge awareness with me was that people were in serious grief. I didn't know that at the time. I was on a bit of a high, thinking, now I'm going to be doing something different. And Ron came into my life to work with me as my musical director. That was something new. And I was blissfully unaware that the world was in tears. And, I mean, in a way that's good because that protected me. It might have made me undecided. It might have made me rethink, perhaps I better not leave, I better go back, because I was causing such an upset. But because I was protected from that awareness, it meant that I started the ball rolling with the experience of being a solo artist on stage and started to record with beautiful orchestras. And so these new experiences, and of course the brilliant experience of working with Ron and starting to love Ron. Yeah,
now tell me about that. Tell me about Ron Edgeworth, who became your husband, a lovely man. He kind of floored you right from the get-go, didn't he, Ron, when you first met him?
He did. I mean, yes, I've told people many times that he said, "What a dolly lady," when I first walked up to him.
That's such a 60s thing to say, isn't it? What a dolly lady.
Oh, look, what a guy, you know. And I didn't fall in love with him immediately, but it was just I couldn't believe somebody said that to me, you see. And, of course, he was such a magnificent pianist and had such empathy with me. And, you know, I later on found how he shared all the different musical tastes that I had. All sorts of things we shared. And so gradually we both, you know, found ourselves falling in love, but we'd both vowed we weren't going to, you know, to ourselves. We'd independently of each other, you know, we'd sort of been thinking, well, we're not going to fall in love with this person because it's a professional relationship. So anyway, of course, we got married and we had 25 wonderful years. Yes.
You had a few adventures together too. Tell me about the time you went to Machu Picchu together.
Oh, yes, indeed. That was amazing. Yes, it was in the time when I was, I just finished recording the second album for A&M. That was the Climb Every Mountain album, actually, which is rather interesting with Machu Picchu. But, yes, so we were on our way to Los Angeles to have some photographs done for the cover of the album. And the plane touched down in Lima, Peru. And someone on board happened to say to Ron, "Oh, are you going to Machu Picchu?" Assuming we were. We'd never heard of it. So we got off the plane and went up there and we stayed overnight, and Ron got me climbing up the top.
How did you stay overnight in Machu?
There was a hotel there. I suppose it's still there. This is 1970, but I imagine it is. I think it's become much more of a mecca now for tourism. But, it was great. Ron was such an adventurer that I actually did more things, I think, when I was with Ron than I wasn't as adventurous when I was with the boys in the Seekers. I tended to stay home a bit, as far as back in the hotel room and things like that, and perhaps not take advantage of what they were all doing maybe. But with Ron, you know, we did it a lot as a couple.
You and Ron were involved in a nasty car accident in 1990. Tell me what happened.
It was at the time really where I thought, okay, I'd been including some of the songs in the shows, but I wanted to go on tour. And we embarked on a 36-date tour, in fact. And we'd done about pretty well, nearly all the tour. And so we were between Kyneton and the next concert. And, yes, we hit a car coming the other way, which was, of course, the unthinkable, meaning that I was injured and the tour had to come to an end. And I had injuries that meant I had to be helicoptered into Melbourne. So it was shocking in that a girl who was driving the other car was killed. So it was really a complicated emotional response that I had at the time, knowing this had happened. But what actually happened was that the media picked up on the fact, of course, that I'd been injured. So it meant a lot of people knew where I was and got in touch. And one thing led to another, that the Seekers actually had a dinner once I was on the mend. And that was when we started talks about maybe we would celebrate our 25-year anniversary coming up.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Did that hospital stay affect your thinking on that?
Well, it did, in the sense that I could have been killed. The other girl had been killed. Anything could have happened. We could have all been killed. And so that fragility, I mean, it really, the enormity of that. And a fan wrote to me and sort of pointed out that John Lennon had died and the Beatles could never sing again together. And in my heart, I'd always wanted to sing with the Seekers again, but I was always worried that life would take off. I knew it would, obviously. The hunger for the Seekers fans for hearing us in person and on record again, it was enormous around the world, and I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to handle it and not lose perspective and lose my direction, musically speaking, that Ron and I had been doing through the previous years. But it seemed so important to do it that, and luckily I'd met John Kovac at the time, who'd become my manager, and I felt with him in control that maybe it could be achieved and that I'd be given the means of wearing both the hats, because it's definitely a different hat that I wear when I'm singing with the Seekers.
And once you had that different hat on and did that 25th reunion tour, and you were there on stage in front of vast audiences that have come to see you after all these years, did that change your thinking on what the Seekers was?
Oh, look, it's been fantastic having had the reunion. Oh, without a doubt. I see the Seekers music as an art form in a way. I see the incredible uplifting quality of it, the uniting factor of it, that all different generations truly are bonded. It's rare.
So you could stand outside it then,
yes,
as well as be part of it this time.
Absolutely, and indeed looking at my own image and realising that my image was integral, the girl next door thing, like you were saying. I think, and of course, having the production on the level with the technology in the 90s compared with back in the 60s. So it was taking us to another level. So I felt that it was fantastic to be given this amazing opportunity. We recorded some other material as well, which was really nice. And to respect the boys and to understand their talent, to really come together as mature adults, that sort of thing was a dimension I never ever dreamt could happen. But it is still hard, though. I mean, creatively now even, it is really hard to wear so many hats. It's a huge challenge. I want to do justice to everything, and I know that I can't sort of get a stand-in or an understudy or something. It's got to be me doing it. So that's, But, as I was mentioning to you earlier, if I trust that the motive is right and if I trust that it's not me struggling to do it, I'm going to be empowered to do it from somewhere else, you see. That's my philosophy, and that enables me to take on a lot more than, logically speaking, you would take on.
Your husband, Ron, was a very, very fit man, very healthy life, but sadly was diagnosed with motor neurone disease. Do you remember when you first noticed something about him, when he wasn't quite right? Well,
Ron went over to London for a short time. This was just halfway through 1992, I think this is right. And when he came back, he'd only been away. Well, in fact, he rang me from London and said he'd had trouble walking up the stairs and he just had to delay his flight to come back. And I found he got back okay, but he had a stick just to help him travel. So it was a huge worry, but he said he was on the mend. But I noticed a bit of a sort of a slurring of his speech. And I said to him, if you notice there's something wrong with your speech. He hadn't noticed that, and he assured me that his walking was improving. So we didn't expect anything would progress from there, but in fact, of course, that is what happened. He thought that antibiotics might have caused it. He'd had flagyl, which we knew had neurological side effects. So certainly that could have been a contributing factor to the sudden onslaught of symptoms. But those symptoms kind of abated a little bit for a while, so they couldn't really quite diagnose him initially. So about 3 months later, he got the official fatal diagnosis, and he was very courageous in allowing people to know that that's what he was dealing with, and I became national patron for motor neurone disease. So at all the concerts since then, there have been volunteers coming to collect, and the people are absolutely amazingly generous. I'm so thrilled.
And you had quite a bit of experience as his carer too. What did that do? What did you understand by becoming the carer of someone who was as ill as Ron was?
Becoming a carer, my heart goes out to carers. People deal with all sorts of illnesses and they need carers, and there's a carers association which is absolutely crucially important to people to take advantage of. Ron was very positive in his outlook, and he encouraged me to continue with my career. He knew that the Seekers reunion concerts were already planned, and he didn't want to be. It would have made him miserable if his illness had meant that nothing could carry on. So he certainly encouraged me. I had the guilt thing that a lot of carers go through, not wanting to leave him and all that. But the people who were caring for him also encouraged me that as his prime carer, that it was important to look after my own health. And so it helped me to adjust, and therefore they made respite available, that so I could go off on tour, and usually people are offered respite so that Ron could be cared for. But yeah, it's so relentless, the symptoms progressing with MND, that you never know what you're going to be confronted with. It's the voluntary muscles that are paralysed, and you're not sure which ones are going to be the ones to be lost first. So some people lose their walking, some people can't breathe as well, you're swallowing. All sorts of things just hit you, and you have to deal with each one in a very quick succession. So it taught me enormously, and of course having had a car accident myself, that when people have difficulties and are disabled in any way, how important it is to have an understanding of their situation.
So that's another part of your life that's a huge part of it.
It is, yes. And indeed, with the Gift of Song album, which was one of the A&M albums that have just been put out on CD for the first time, it's brought to mind with me the importance of the lyric of a song that David Riley wrote on that album. And all these years, it's only been in this last few years that I've realised the significance of the lyric that he wrote, even at 18 years old. It's called I Can Say, and it's about using your eyes to say things when you can't express anything with speech. So I do sing it on stage in the repertoire I'm doing, and it's been a very meaningful moment for me in the shows. I cover a gamut of music, of course, in the tour. It's pretty mind-boggling. I've even got my sousaphone on tour, by the way, which I bought in the 70s, and that allows me to do 4 songs with the trad jazz feel fairly authentically on stage to represent the jazz years of my life.
You've had a few offers of marriage over the years too, haven't you, via the internet?
I have. How did you hear about that? Yes. Yes, I have.
Might have made them.
Well, thank you, Richard. Wow, I'm very lucky, aren't I? Who would have thought? I never dreamt that would happen, and that people would say they were in love with me and had been in love with me for a while.
Will you marry me, Judith Durham? Via email. Isn't that sweet?
Oh, it's sweet. Yes, and one guy would have had me, playing tennis with him in Barbados. It could have been a great life. Yes.
So here you are filling concert halls again, and do you ever get to slip away and sing in a club? Do you ever want to do that kind of small room thing?
Yes. I don't do it, but yes, that lovely experience. There's nothing like it. We did a small club when I first got the hottest band in town together, and we did the 100 Club in London. It was great fun, I
think you were there just months before the Sex Pistols in 1974.
That'd be right.
Because there you are on the stage, and there's the big 100 behind you there in Oxford Street. And I was just seeing you take Judith Durham out, and you can put the Sex Pistols up there, and it's almost the same photo. I just think it's hilarious. Judith Durham going before the Sex Pistols.
Oh, yes. But it's not that far removed from the fact that Daniel Johns got in touch to have me sing a duet with him on the Straight Lines album as a bonus.
From Silverchair, right, originally.
Absolutely, yes. I'm very honoured to have sung on English Garden, which was a song he especially wrote. It was a bonus track when that album was on sale. It probably still is.
Well, Judith, I hope you come back for your 60th anniversary and your 70th after that in showbiz. It's so lovely to have you on the program in such fine voice after all these years too, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Very nice.
Judith Durham is touring Australia with the Colours of My Life tour, and there are details for that tour all over the place, and I think we're going to put them up on our website, aren't we, Pam? There we go. And look, I know it's corny, and I don't do the corny thing. I don't do this, Judith. I promise. Normally I wouldn't do this, but you just have to do it when it's a song like The Carnival Is Over.
Oh, wow.
This beautiful Russian folk song that was turned by Tom Springfield into a song for the Seekers, and your version of it is perfect, and it's probably best go out on it, I think. Judith, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you very much.
listening to a podcast of Conversations with Richard Fidler. For more information and interviews, visit abc.net.au/conversations.